Nina and I are starting up now a project which is trying to do that in a way. That is, I am, which most of you may not know, I dislike Richard Florida to a great extent. I dislike him, not personally, I've never met the man, but I really, really dislike the guy. I've seen him lecture, but I've never met him. I dislike him, and I dislike ethos, because it started from the notion that in order for the creative economy to go, this needed to be, in a sense, led from the top. He thought it is very much a macro thought. As long as we design the city, the creatives will come. It worked very much on claiming things like it is the cities with the biggest gay enclaves that will be the creative ones. This is what I call this gay ghettos approach to the creative city. This to me is very much a product of the old economy, very much a product of the old way of thinking, in which you could always kind of trust kind of macro level work, in which the regional planning rep, the city mayor, could kind of deem certain things to happen. I'm much more interested today in seeing how creativity can be brought up in the local and grassroots movements through something I call creative infrastructures, actually looking at how creativity in the creative economy works in its everyday contexts. And this is because I believe that in building a sustainable creative economy, we cannot just look at the big picture, look at the elegant picture of where we'll kind of trust wallpaper, the magazine, to point our way, but rather say, in an age of less, in an age where economies become smaller, we actually need to go to micro-level processes and to see how the small movements, rather than the big gala dinner speeches, will push the creative economy forward. Creativity and the crises. I think there are several plays you can make with just these two words. One is, of course, that creativity itself isn't a crisis. It might not be its own crisis, but creativity itself is suffering, of course, from the crises that surrounds us. Second, of course, is the crisis creativity. What kind of creativity does a crisis create? Interestingly, when people have studied creative cities, their focus has always been on cities that are doing really well. Houston, New York, London. Very few have looked at my favorite city that I've never been in. Sorry?
Detroit.
There's a little actually being done on Detroit now. It's actually quite fun. In Detroit, you're starting to see artist collectives buying up houses for literally no money at all and setting up. I'm really fascinated by that movement. I tried to talk to some people in the US whether that's trackable in any way, because I guess you read the same New York Times article I did on it. But it's actually really difficult. You know these small enclaves are popping up. But that's exactly the kind of movement I'm keen on looking at. But it's received a lot less attention than the New Yorks and Londons. And a lot less than my favorite city, Lagos, Nigeria. A city so incredibly chaotic, as it seems, that all kind of our notions of how a creative city should be formed are thrown out the window. Just something I picked up from Rehn in Lagos, the traffic is so insane that people actually drive into the traffic jams, knowing full well that they will last for over an hour. So they just drive into a traffic jam and then step out and do their grocery shopping in the traffic jam. Because you have these moving marketplaces that follow traffic jams to sell groceries to people waiting to get out of them. Now that is the creative economy. Now, that is truly it reminds me of Hakim Bey's notions of temporally autonomous zones, only on a really kind of intense micro level. Now, so what I'm going to spend the next year working on is kind of looking at movements such as the Detroit thing, in which crashing real estate prices can actually generate artists' collectives, or traffic jams in Lagos, or more precisely, what's happening in Åbo, in Turku. In the work leading up to the year when the city will be the cultural capital of Europe, and I'm trying to create a, should I say, less engaged, less apoplectic notion of creative economy. The philosophers Deleuze and Guattari in A Thousand Plateaus write about the difference between the royal science and the nomadic science. How many of you have read Deleuze and Guattari? A few. I'm interested in whether this, I just use this as an example of how to kind of try to reconceptualize. The way the creative economy today is often comprehended is reminiscent of Deleuze and Guattari's notion of the royal science. That which has the political capital, that which occupies the central space, that which tries to extend its mode of control further and further. What I'm interested in whether there can be a nomadic science, a nomadic philosophy, if you will, of the creative, in which we do not track the big movements, the isn't this great, isn't this expansion great, but rather in the small changes, the small movements, the maker fairs, the house occupants, the elderly, the way in which the creative economy exists not as a political concept given to us, but exists as an action concept through 1,000 broken, fragmented pieces, some of which might not even see that its name is the creative economy. Because I do believe that one of the great problems with any kind of statement regarding creativity and the creative economy is our incessant desire to name and our incessant desire to define, and in this way enact symbolic violence against the concept by limiting its possibilities of being. So, in that way, kind of see what happens to the notion of creativity when you no longer have these assumptions about it, no longer want to give novelty pride of place in the argument, no longer want to kind of accept or take for granted that creativity is necessarily a good thing, but trying to kind of rebuild by deconstructing, picking apart in order to see what can happen. And here we can of course see that crises are, in a very real sense, a good thing. Crises, of course, when they affect people negatively are bad. But on a systemic level, crises have a lot of good qualities to them. Crises force us to re-evaluate things. Crises enable change. Crises breaks down things that were not sustainable and could not stand. It is interesting that if you read things like the New Left Review or basically most neo-Marxist literature now, there is glee. There's a lot of glee in kind of pointing out, oh, we told you so, and this we claimed all the time. So, but there's very little real joy.